All right, our speakers today are John and Katie, and they are with South Dakota Magazine, a pretty ubiquitous magazine, and we are very excited to have you talk about that and its 40th anniversary. So come on up, please.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I'm going to get started then. Well, thanks so much for having us. Thank you to Michael for inviting us to come on. And I know Michael's a magazine reader, so thank you. And I've met some other readers in the room, too. My name is Katie Hunhoff, and I'm the publisher of South Dakota Magazine. And John Andrews here is the editor of South Dakota Magazine. And we've been working together for over 10 years. Almost 20 years. That's what I meant, 20. Okay. We're here because we love talking about the magazine, but also because we're celebrating our 40th anniversary of the magazine. My parents started the magazine in 1985 in Yankton, and we've grown to be the largest paid publication in the state of South Dakota, and we're really proud of that. So John and I wanted to come and talk to you. We're going to try to keep it short, so in case there's questions. We always enjoy answering reader questions, so we'll try to keep it short, but we just want to talk about what we do with the magazine and why we think it's important. So we like to describe what we do as road journalism. We don't sit behind a desk and write about South Dakota from a distance. We get in the car, we drive on gravel roads, we sit at kitchen tables and tailgates, and listen to people tell us what their corner of the state means to them. And that's where our stories come from. And somebody earlier today when we were eating asked where we get our story ideas. So we do come up with some of them, but all of our best ideas really come from the readers. And once we go out and start interviewing people and start getting on the road, that's when we get even more story ideas come to us too. Now I wanted to read an excerpt from a story that I wrote that because next we're going to talk about why we think our work matters and why these stories matter to South Dakotans. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from something I wrote about, I think this was 2 years ago. Our staff went up to the South Dakota Festival of Books in Brookings, and so I just sat in on some of the sessions, and I ended up writing my publisher's letter about one of the sessions I attended. Okay. Am I talking loud enough? Can everyone hear me? Okay. So this is called Running with Billy, and it's about Billy Mills. Billy Mills began the last lap at the Tokyo Olympics. He knew low blood sugar was draining his energy. His vision was cloudy. He tried to focus his eyes forward on Australian Ron Clark, the world record holder and the clear favorite. Then he saw Clark turning to look at him. Maybe he's getting worried, thought Mills. With just 400 feet remaining in the 10,000-meter race, Mills felt a sudden burst of energy. He moved to the outside and started running as strongly as if the starting gun had just sounded. He rocketed past Clark and exploded through the finish line. Of course, I wasn't there for Mills's victory in 1964, but I was watching in September when he showed a film of his legendary race at the South Dakota Festival of Books. As Mills crossed the finish line and celebrated, I felt my heart expand in my chest and tears came to my eyes. Later, Mills told us that when he felt that burst of energy, he clearly remembered seeing an eagle insignia on a German competitor's singlet as he passed him. The vision reminded him suddenly of his childhood on Pine Ridge, and he recalled his father telling him he had the wings of an eagle. After the race, Mills found the German competitor, but there was no eagle insignia on his tracksuit. The imagined eagle had guided the South Dakotan to a victory that is still considered one of the biggest upsets in Olympic history. After Mills' speech was over, my friends and I walked out into the bright autumn sunlight. I was still feeling a high after watching the win. I felt like I was right there, winning the gold medal alongside him. I laughed with my friends. My friends laughed with me. They too felt like they had won the gold medal. If Billy Mills can make a slow runner like me feel like an Olympic medalist, it's a strong testament to the power of stories. Here at South Dakota Magazine, we learned long ago that stories have power, and they unite us in beautiful ways. So that's kind of an example of a story idea we got on the road, and also one that kind of highlights what we do at the magazine, why we think telling these stories is important. One really important thing that we think the stories do is giving people a sense of place and a sense of pride in their place. And we overwhelmingly feel this, and I think as Rotarians you would understand that if we can make people have pride in their place, care about where they live, in turn, we think that they will take a better care of their home. And that's one really important thing that we do. So now I'm going to let John to talk about one of our favorite stories that he's ever written, a really important story, and then we'll take questions, I think.
Well, so hello everybody, I'm John Andrews. I am the managing editor at South Dakota Magazine. A little about me, I grew up in Lake Norden, South Dakota, which is about 20 miles south of Watertown. I got a degree in journalism at South Dakota State and then came down here and did a master's in history back in the Herb Hoover era, a master's in South Dakota history. And while I was here, I did a thesis on Governor Dick Knipe, so I got to hang out with Mr. Ted Munster in his office over at the foundation and heard.
My ducks that were there at the time.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Heard lots of good stories about South Dakota government in the 1970s. So, if any of you are suffering from insomnia and are looking for a way to fall asleep, just go over to ID Weeks. I'm sure that thesis is sitting on the shelves somewhere. It'll help you. I'm sure it will. Not because of Ted's stories, but because of everything else that I put in there, probably. But so I've been at the magazine now since 2007, so we're coming up on 19 years, and have written and edited and proofread a lot of stories. But one of the probably one of the most powerful ones, and one that I usually like to talk about when I go speak to groups, is a story called "The Martyrs of Rockport." And maybe some of you who have been in audiences before and have heard me talk about it. But it was a story. This is probably 15 years ago now. Whoops. Probably 15 years ago, I read about these Hutterite brothers from the Rockport Hutterite colony up in Hanson County. It's kind of along the James River, south of Alexandria, who had been drafted to fight in World War II. But of course, as Hutterites, they're pacifists. And so it led to all sorts of trouble, which we'll read about. I have a little excerpt here to read. But they ultimately died. Two of them died in prison because of this whole ordeal. So when I first came across this story, it was not one that the magazine had ever told before, and so when we come across things like that, we try to find some way to put some sort of a modern day spin on, especially a historical story like this. So I thought, it would be great if I could go up to Rockport Hutterite Colony and sort of dig around and see what I can find up there. And so at this point in my life, I'd never been, to a Hutterite colony. Of course, they're all over South Dakota, but I had never been one. I had no idea how receptive they would be to some random unknown outsider coming in and digging up this, what I imagined to be a painful story for them. But I got a hold of the head minister, Joseph Whiff was his name at the time. And he said, well, yeah, you come on up, we'll show you around. So I drove up to Rockport, as Katie said, down a gravel road in the middle of Hanson County and met the head minister, who sort of toured me around the colony and brought me out to the cemetery where the brothers, Michael and Joseph Hofer, are buried. So here, I'm just going to read a short sort of edited excerpt of that story that appeared about 15 years ago. In May 1918, the Hanson County Draft Board sent brothers Michael, Joseph, and David Hofer and their brother-in-law Jacob Whiff notices to report to Camp Lewis in Seattle for training. The four young men felt bound to obey the law, but Hutterites are staunch pacifists whose religion bars them from even wearing a military uniform. After meeting with their minister, they decided to go to Camp Lewis, but they would refuse all war-related duties. The four went to Parkston to await a westbound train. Men hurled insults at them as they waited on the platform. Once aboard, they huddled together in a compartment and locked the door. A young draftee from Alexandria begged the Hutterites to let him in. He insisted he simply wanted to talk to them. When they complied, a whole crowd rushed in. They taunted the Hutterites, then seized Whiff and Michael Hofer and cut pieces of hair from their heads and beards. When the train arrived, commanding officers ordered the men to fall in with their squads. The Hofer brothers and Whiff refused. They were jailed in the camp's guardhouse. A few days later, they were ordered to complete standard paperwork, which they also refused. The four were court-martialed in a trial that took less than 3 hours. The sentence, 20 years in the U.S. disciplinary barracks at Alcatraz. Guards at the island prison in San Francisco Bay forcefully removed the men's clothing and ordered them to put on uniforms. Again, they refused, so they were taken to the cold, damp cells wearing just light underwear. And since I've written this, I've gotten to take a trip to San Francisco, to Alcatraz, so you can get a better sense of, you saw the tiny cold, damp steel cells where they were actually held. For 4.5 days, the only nourishment they received was half a glass of water. They were forced to spend a day standing with their hands chained crosswise over their heads to the iron bars of their cell, their feet barely touching the floor. The Hofers and Whiffs spent 4 months in the dank desolation of Alcatraz. After the armistice was declared in November 1918, they were transferred to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. They arrived late on a cold winter's night, chained by their arms, carrying their bags in one hand and their Bibles in the other. Drenched in sweat, they stood outside in the chill for 2 hours until prison clothes arrived. The next day, complaining of chest pains, Joseph and Michael Hofer were hospitalized. David Hofer and Whiff were placed in solitary cells, their hands chained through the doors. They stood for 9 hours a day, nourished only by bread and water. As Joseph and Michael Hofer grew frailer, Whiff telegraphed their wives at Rockport. The women left for Fort Leavenworth, but because of some confusion, the railroad agent sold them tickets to Fort Riley instead. They lost an entire day of traveling and didn't see their husbands until late on November 29th. Joseph Hofer died of pneumonia the next day. When his wife arrived, she was horrified to find him lying in a coffin, dressed in a military uniform. Michael Hofer died on December 2nd, also from pneumonia. Because his family was with him when he died, they ensured he was dressed in his own clothes. After the families returned to South Dakota with the bodies for burial, David Hofer was left in his cell to mourn his brothers. "I stood there all day and cried," he said, "but I could not even wipe my tears away, since my hands were chained to the bars of my prison cell." So if you go to Rockport, they have a little colony cemetery, and the brothers are buried there. They have just very simple metallic nameplates where their graves are marked. But I learned that if you grow up on a Hutterite colony anywhere in North America, you grow up hearing this story. And at some point in your life, you take a trip to Rockport Hutterite colony, and you go to the cemetery, and you pay your respects to these two martyrs of Rockport, as we call them. So I thought that was, that's a pretty powerful story in and of itself. But it really made me sort of realize the power that stories can have and the reach that they can have when about a year after this magazine appeared, I was in my office working on a story, and the phone rang. And the guy on the other end said, "Are you the guy who wrote that story about the Hutterites that died in World War I?" And immediately I'm thinking, oh, geez, what did I get wrong? What's this guy gonna? But it turned out this guy was an over-the-road truck driver, and his rig had broken down somewhere in the middle of Utah. And he was sitting in the waiting room of this mechanic's shop, waiting for his truck to get done. And for some reason, there on the waiting room table lay that issue of South Dakota Magazine. And he read the story, and he told me when I got done reading it, I just had to call someone and talk about it. And since he didn't know who else to call, he looked at who wrote it and called the magazine and figured, well, that guy knows what this is all about, so I'll talk to him. And so it just made me realize, when we're putting together a magazine, we get one done. We just sent one to print here a couple of weeks ago. But for me anyway, it's almost like, at that point, those stories that we've been working on for however long, they're done, they're gone, they're out there. And you don't know where they're going to go and who's going to read them and what effect they're going to have on that particular person. So that's an instance that just sort of helps cement to me the power of stories and the importance of what we do with the magazine. So did you want to do Did you want to do questions, or do you want to do any more reading, or are you good?
No, I think that's good. We always have fun hearing, like I'm going to say this now and there's not going to be any questions, but, oh, John. I'm glad you didn't. Okay.
It's a good thing. I'm very agile for a 46-year-old middle-aged man. It's a good thing, right?
Well, but yeah, so hopefully I didn't shoot myself in the foot, but we always have fun answering questions. So I'd like to take some time, but hopefully there are some questions. So yes.
So your subscriptions, like how many are what you consider local, and how many, where's the furthest away that you?
Oh, well, we send about 500 copies abroad that go like all over Europe and in Asia, like outside of the country. But I think the breakdown is that about 35 to 40% are out of state, and then the rest of them are in state. But we have quite a few readers who, don't even have any connection to South Dakota at all, but I don't know, maybe they started hunting here, or for some reason they fell in love with South Dakota, and maybe some of them haven't even visited yet. But we do have a lot of people across the country are really in love with South Dakota.
We make sure, we are children of immigrants. My grandma was from Norway, which means we have tons of first cousins still in Norway, and we make sure they get South Dakota Magazine so they know what life is here for their American cousins, right?
Yep, most of our out-of-state or out-of-the-country subscriptions do go to kind of like to Europe, probably for those reasons, yeah. Hi.
What was it like for your dad in the beginning when he started the magazine, the first 1, 2, 3 years financially, business risk, and where did the idea come from to start the magazine?
Okay, yeah, I wish my dad was here to answer this. He's always pretty funny when he answers it, because I know he had to sell a cow at one point to pay a printing bill. And then another story that always got to me was that one time he was driving around the state selling ads, and he didn't have enough gas to get home. He was in Mitchell, and he was like walking in every business to try to sell an ad so he could buy gas money to get back to Yankton. So I think, it was tough going, but things back then were a little bit different too. I think it was maybe easier back then to start a business than it is now. You don't have so much red tape and insurance to worry about and that kind of thing. But he always says that South Dakotans were just always really supportive of him, and they were willing to, trust him enough that he was going to put out the magazine and write him a check and trust him for that 1 year. I can't remember how much the first magazine subscription cost, but I think it was under $10 a year. But and it's just grown from there. I feel like you asked another question that I was gonna. Do you have anything about? What did he ask about the? Help me out here.
It was finances and how the first few years.
Yeah. Oh, why he got the idea to get started. He had a newspaper in Yankton. He started the year I was born, he started the Yankton County Observer, which you might have heard of. And then I think he ran the Shopper. And then when he sold the Shopper, which I think is still in existence today, right? The Shopper. When he sold that, he signed a no-compete clause that said he couldn't start another newspaper in South Dakota, but it didn't say anything about magazines. And, it's not like he was looking for a loophole or anything. Well, I guess he was. But I think he thought, I'm going to get out of the newspaper business, and he even looked at different places to live in Colorado, but he just decided, no, I want to make, South Dakota my home. And so, yeah, he did find that loophole. Luckily for me and John, since we have jobs today because of that. But thanks, that was a good question. Yep.
So I'm a longtime subscriber, big fan.
Thank you.
Things that I always look for immediately are the map to see how many times Vermillion is mentioned. I really appreciate that as a feature.
Yeah.
So one of the things, if you look in here, it always says the towns where the stories take place. So whatever town you are in South Dakota, you can see if your town is featured. And Vermillion gets pretty good coverage, which I always appreciate. And then I love reading the letters, because oftentimes there is somebody that's like, actually, my dad knew that guy, and he was a second baseman, not a, in 1920 or whatever. Which is just like, is always so lovely. But one of the things I've really enjoyed this last year with the 40th anniversary is these like compilation issues that you guys have been doing. And the one with a picture from every year was so good. I love that issue so much, and I thought, yes, you've got it. Rebecca's got it over here, the 40 years, 40 quote. If you haven't looked at this issue, It is so awesome, and I was actually reading it on a trip from here to the hills. It was like just like the perfect reading material. And I was wondering if, I know you guys do some books, like have you thought about doing a book of just like the photos of the 40 years? Because I think that would be awesome.
Yes, so we have published books. I think our first book we published for our 20th anniversary, so 21 years ago, and we published a photo book and South Dakota's Best Stories. And we sold out of that Best Stories within a few years. So by far, that was our most popular. And John and I have been working ever since to try to print another one. But we're always like, we have deadlines all the time with the magazine. But no, we have plans to come out with some books. I think our goals would be to do a photo book, to do another South Dakota Best Stories. And then the typewriter issue that we passed out, that's our kind of matches the photo issue, by the way. So that's our best stories from the 40 years, and then we have our favorite photos from the 40 years. But and then we also want to do a travel book too. So we have published books throughout the years, and we have some available right now too. We have Outlaws and Scofflaws and an aerial photography book that we're really proud of too. Kind of a heavy coffee table book that we have available. Do you have anything else to say about that?
I don't think so. That was a little inside baseball on that 40 photos. That was a really fun issue to put together because all we did for weeks on end was gather in the conference room and go through digital issues of each magazine for the last 40 years and try to figure out which photo was the best. And we'd pick about 5 or 6, and then we'd have to whittle them down. And I mean. Yeah. Can you imagine a better way to spend your day than sitting in a conference room looking at all these photographs from 40 years?
I think it was supposed to, if I remember right, it was only supposed to be one photo for every year, but we obviously didn't stick to that. We have that. Hi. Oh,
John,
Art.
it was my understanding always that as a result of what happened to the Hopers, that most of the Rotarian colonies in South Dakota left and moved to Canada.
Yep, a lot of them.
Come back.
Yep. They were gone. They were in Canada for a number of years, and then they eventually came back to. In fact, I think that's for a while they called it Old Rockport and New Rockport because of that. Yep.
There's a new Rockport now too.
And a new, yeah, right. They keep branching.
Up on the
Yeah.
county line.
Yep.
I'm a long-time subscriber original, and I have a question that's probably better for your dad. That a number of the columnists you've had over the years are like old friends. How did you recruit those guys to do columns, recurring columns in the magazine?
Do you want to answer that?
Well, I don't know how you found Paul.
Oh, yeah, that would be a little bit before both of our time. Because they were writing columns when John and I both started. I started there about 23 years ago, and then John's at 19. But Roger Holtzman, I grew up with him. He started working at the magazine when I was probably like 14 or something like that. And then shortly after that when Roger had his illness. So we worked with him. So we worked with him for a long time every day. But Roger was in a wheelchair. He got West Nile virus, and the mosquito bit him kind of like close to his spine. So. And he was just a fantastic writer, and I think, so he was kind of like a captive columnist for us. We just got to work with them, and that was the one, no matter how good or bad he was feeling, he always made sure to get that column done. And then Paul Higbee, I think when we first started writing, and Paul Higbee is a freelancer for us. He usually writes about one article per issue, and then also his column. And I think my dad, being based in Yankton, he just really wanted to have a voice from West River. And we have had approaches for columns throughout the years, but we felt like we had it covered. Roger got the humor covered, we got East River covered, and Paul's our West River correspondent. So yeah, we're really lucky to have them, and really sad that we lost Roger this spring. Hi.
Yeah, I wanted to comment about your dad. He did an article on the Missouri River flood in 2011.
Yeah.
Came out to our straw bale house south of Wagner on the river. He did a tremendous job with photos and the story on that. It was perilous conditions the time when he was out there. The water was rising. It was is at its max. As the front, the cover shows a beautiful picture of our straw.
Right.
Completely surrounded by water.
Yeah, that was a really impressive photo. Yeah, he didn't tell me that he was in kind of dangerous circumstances.
And also,
The boat ride that took him out there was perilous.
yeah.
He didn't tell me, but yeah, I would have been mad.
Yeah, that's what you don't know, right? That sort of illustrates a sort of a principle that we've sort of guide ourselves by. You know, we want all of our stories to be timeless. You know, we want you to be able to pick up a magazine that was written 7 years ago. In fact, one of my friends in Yankton was just having this conversation with me, Steve, a couple of months ago. He said he was somewhere and he found a magazine written from 2019, but he didn't realize it, and he was reading all these stories, and then he noticed the date on the front, and he's, I thought this was new. I thought this just came out. So, I mean, we want these stories to be timeless, but we also are cognizant of the fact that sometimes things happen, like the Missouri River flood in 2011. I mean, I remember Bernie saying, this is probably something that we should get out and cover immediately. Same thing with the Cattleman's Blizzard, Winter Storm Atlas. I mean, that was such an unprecedented, well, I don't want to use the word unprecedented, but it was such a cataclysmic event that we knew was going to be unmatched by anything. And, well, he sort of had that gut feeling, probably from a lifetime of journalism. You know, he sort of had that gut feeling that this is something that we need to get out and chronicle. So yeah, we try to, it's sort of a mix of these timeless stories and opportunities to get out and capture things as they're happening.
I was just wondering when you see the next 40 years.
Oh.
Like,
That's-
what challenges, opportunities,
Yeah.
industry that you're facing right now?
Yeah, there are quite a few. As you probably all know, a lot of local journalism is kind of either being bought up by conglomerates or they're closing. So we think that local journalism is more important than ever. But we realize that that's happening, and you know, we're trying to prepare for the future. Like one thing I did want to mention earlier, and I think this is a good time to mention it, is that we have a new website now where you can access our, well, we have 2 interns in the office working on it right now, but we're inputting all 40 years of our issues online. So if you're a paid subscriber, by the way, a subscription is $29 a year. If you're a paid subscriber to the print magazine, you also get access to all 41 years of our content, photos, and searchable content as well. But I would say we just have like a really renewed sense that what we do is more important now than ever. I feel like we've mentioned that quite a few times throughout this, but we really do want to continue just providing an authentic, real voice for South Dakotans, something that's going to like kind of unite us as South Dakotans rather than divide us. So we don't know exactly what the future holds, but we do think that having a unique voice, like a real voice out there that is telling like real stories, is going to be more important now than ever. So we're hopeful for the future. We're not, you know, we have to kind of always like figure out how to do things. Like now you can auto renewal, for example, in the magazine. That's something like when John and I started working in the magazine, you know, all of the renewal notices, and most of them still are, but they come through the Postal Service. And we all know the Postal Service has been having a lot of troubles lately. So anyway, we just have to adapt in order to survive. But my gut feeling is that if we keep on telling good stories, the readers will be there for us. And John, you probably have some good insights on that.
Well, so I've been doing this for 20 years, which admittedly is not a very long time in the grand scheme of things. But I can even remember when I was getting out of college, people were already telling me, you know, print is on the way out. Print is not going to be around for very much longer, so you better figure out what you're going to do. And, you know, we've been approached over the years many times about doing television shows, like a television show out in Rapid City. Somebody approached us about doing that, and podcasts, and, you know, they all have their place in the world, but, you know, print has died out in some cases. Where I think we're different is that, you know, we're telling stories that you can't see in 6 other media outlets on any given day. And you know, we treat each issue almost like it's its own work of art, with the writing and the photography. And that gets demonstrated when people call us. That's another thing about us is that, if you call South Dakota Magazine to renew, you're calling and talking to one of us, like, in person. And there's so many readers that call us and say, I've got every issue of this magazine from 1985. I've got them, they've got them in binders or they've got them stacked in their closet or wherever they are, but they can't bring themselves to get rid of them. There's some sort of a connection that's been made. And so that's where I think that we're a little different. And I think if we just continue sort of forging that connection and creating this sort of almost like a South Dakota Magazine readership family, you all feel like you belong to something when you're all united around this publication, then I think we'll be all right.
I was just wondering, how many, what's your goal every month as far as the number of stories? I would imagine by now you sort of have an idea of how many stories you need for each publication. And also, how far ahead are you? I would imagine you're not scrambling to get July's issue out yet.
July's issue is done.
No, that's a good question. I feel like we've been putting out a magazine every 2 months for so long. We're probably a little bit lackadaisical about it. I'm not saying that we're far behind, but we are pretty flexible too. Like, for example, this is something I wanted to say too. So that July-August issue that we just sent to the printer, we're really proud of it. It's 148 pages, which is the biggest South Dakota magazine that we've ever printed, the most pages. And it's our South Dakota Arts issue. So we worked in conjunction with Arts South Dakota and the South Dakota Arts Council. And we're really proud of that. But I would say that came together pretty last minute. But we had to be kind of flexible too. And we just see what events are happening out in the state too, and so we can change that. But in general, we are thinking a little bit about photos for a year out, because because of our 4 seasons, we want to make sure we get kind of appropriate or pretty photos. So that's something that we're looking at way beyond our print date. Do you want to add anything?
So if you come to our office, which you're all welcome to do, we publish in the Pennington House, which was built in 1875 for Territorial Governor John Pennington. It's the only Territorial Governor's house still standing. But if you go back into the conference room where we meet, we have a great big whiteboard that's divided into our 6 issues. And so as we come up with story ideas, we'll plop them into whatever issue we think is most appropriate. Like Katie said, with the arts issue that we just put out, a lot of that came together probably within the last 3 months. And which is one of the advantages of having been doing this for as long as we have. We can get away with doing that every now and then. But sometimes, if you want to do a story on the Nora Store Christmas sing-alongs, you're going to go there one year and you're going to interview your people and you're going to take your photos, and that's not going to see print for another 12 months. So, you have all that stuff and you just sort of set it aside, or you work on it a little bit as you go. So as Katie said, a lot of things are seasonal. If we're doing fall foliage photo essays, that sits around for a year before it sees the print product. Other stories, I think probably just most recently the story on the most recent Medal of Honor winner, Royce Williams from up in Wilmot. That just happened here within the last few months, and that was a story that we thought needed to be told. So we sort of squeezed that in and got that done. So it's sort of a mix of flying by the seat of our pants and actually preparing for a little while.
You write in both the first person singular and the third person. Do you have criteria that determine which you use?
Oh, I thought we used the editorial leading. You do it this one.
Well, I think it all sort of depends on what makes the story flow better. It's all about entertainment and readability. And if it's a first-person experience, I've written stories. I went out hunting Fairburn agates one time, and I think I wrote that in the I did this, I did that, and others are we, they, and it just all sort of depends on what the subject matter of the story is, how you think it's better in terms of its readability.
Well, thank you so much. We'll have you, there's a drawing at the end, so I'll have one of you draw a name out here.